We called this emergency meeting to give the superintendent an opportunity to update the committee as a whole on the follow-up to the events of Saturday, specific to the field hockey bus, cross-country bus returning from the meet on the Cape and the driver's arrest for OUI. There's been a lot of information provided from the superintendent's office as well as the police department, including the press conference yesterday, statements that have gone out. The superintendent has been in communication with individual members of the school committee, but given the significance of the event and the obvious immediate need to make sure measures were in place to ensure that it doesn't happen again, we felt it necessary to have the superintendent provide us an update as soon as possible, and tonight afforded us that opportunity. So, Dr. McLeod, I would turn it over to you for a report.
So in preparation for the meeting, I have gone through all of my notes and all of my communications, and the first one that went out on Sunday, I had individual conversations with some of you, but we haven't had a meeting. This is our first meeting to talk as a group. So the first thing was the message that I sent out to the high school parents, and this I worked with Linda Henderson, our data person, to communicate the message to the high school parents. At that point, that was the decision that was made, basically just saying this is what we know and we're going to continue to update you as we get more information. The next information, auto alert went out the next day, the Monday, towards the end of the day, and that was after I'd been able to gather more information. I was able to report on not only what we know in terms of the charges, but also how it was. The biggest question that people had at that point was, how is it that somebody with 2 priors can be driving a bus? So I addressed it not only in this letter to the community, but also in the press release yesterday. Clearly, if you have other questions, I'd like to hear them. The next thing that I did was to get in touch with Joe Connolly. Ralph and I had a conversation with him to let him know that I was not going to be following any directions from the company, that we were going to make decisions about our own drivers, and that I would be personally reviewing the queries. They have all been resubmitted today. I required that they be resubmitted, and that they submit to fingerprinting. Everybody's, I can confirm with you now that every one of our regular drivers' queries were submitted today and documented, and they're on my desk for me to review tomorrow. In addition, I have asked that the Connolly bus provide me with a pool of sub-drivers. Something else that I've learned through this process is that we have not only our regular drivers, but when our regular drivers, so the go-to is always to go with our regular drivers, but if they're not available for a sporting event or for an event that takes place during the day, like a field trip, then we will not get our regular drivers, we'll get a sub-driver. There has been no consistency around who those drivers have been. So I said that I wanted a pool of drivers and I wanted queries on all those drivers, and I only wanted those drivers to be used for subbing or for field trips in our district. That is in process. He said he would get that to me tomorrow. I can then follow up with getting queries on all of those individuals, which obviously they're all licensed, so they've been queried. I want to confirm that. It's not that they're not queried, but we have our own process, and it holds us to a higher level, because as I've explained and learned, they are required to submit, in order to get their license, an annual query, an annual SORI, and a driver record check in order to maintain their licensure, their license. Obviously, cooperating with Hopkinton Police in their investigation of the matter, and as you know, the Chief and Detective Brennan joined me in the joint press conference yesterday afternoon. So I'm looking at some questions that I've received. I've been responding as quickly as I can to individual parent emails. I have, in fact, today because it's hard to know who received my letter and who did not, because I did also hear that some people didn't, which is a listserv issue. So I shared it as well with all of the principals in case they were hearing that. But just to be sure, I've been emailing individuals who have reached out to me as an individual and attaching the communication to date, but answering any questions that they had when they contacted me. This is something from Jean, who is asking that Michelle McNulty review our bus contract. I have shared the bus contract with a couple of you that asked me for it, to determine the level of negligence on the part of the bus company, and reviewing communications to and training for coaches, as well as safety team planning. These are things that we need to look at going forward. I think that we have concerns on the basis, concerns for our students, concerns for the message that our students have around drunk driving, and this is something that I've followed up with Principal Bishop, to work with with Bruce Elliott, our wellness SML, to make sure that we deliver a message that this is not okay, right? That all of these concerns around drinking and driving and the message that they potentially could have, that they got home okay anyway, we need to have a conversation about that, and an open conversation that involves parents and students, and all of us, really, to make sure that we are supporting our students very carefully through all of this. What else do I have here? This was my conversation with our legal counsel, Michelle McNulty, during all of the questions and contact that you all had from different media sources, and you all directed it through me, which is the way it needs to happen. She advised me to have the press conference. She said, if you're up to having it, it's absolutely the right thing to do, because in the absence of a press conference, there's all sorts of questions and suspicions. And so that's exactly what we did. We invited everybody, reached out to our local press as well to make sure that they were included, and got a common message out to everybody in terms of what we knew about the situation so far.
Were the coaches included in the press conference?
Sorry, so this actually isn't a public forum, so.
Okay.
Do we do public comment though at the end?
We can look at possibility of public comment at the end, but
Okay.
let's wait until.
Okay.
Let's wait until. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. And that's where, I told you about speaking with Connolly. We were at Emma. I'm trying to remember what else we did today. That was the bulk of it, is following up with Mr. Dumas on making sure that we had that conversation with him. He actually came to see me. Joe Connolly did. And it has been fully cooperative with my requirements, that going forward, this is the way it's going to be. So, questions from you?
Yes, sir.
Sure. I have a question with respect to the quarries and looking at them, because now we've learned, I think, that they go back 5 years. So when you say you're having a quarry done, and Jean's shaking her head, so maybe that's misinformation, but I thought someone at some point said the quarry does not go back
Okay.
25 years, or it's not going to catch something like that.
Ours do.
Okay.
Okay, so the state requirement for the license for the drivers only goes back 5 years. That's why I say we are held to a higher standard. We have access to information I have access to all of the information that goes back as far as, I think, 17 years old, I believe. So I will have access to that information. And I need to also state that the bus company does not do its own quarries. So one of the things I need to do is follow up at the state level to say, how can this happen?
So the state is responsible for qualifying the driver.
RMV,
Through
through
their
the-
license and the Corey that they do, which has a
the
5-year
Department
standard.
of Utilities. Isn't
Right,
that
the
what he
Department of
says?
Utilities,
Yeah.
Which has a
That's
5-year
where the
standard.
responsibility is for the licensure, which I told you what the requirements were on an annual basis. And so, yes, they only look back 5 years, apparently.
So prior to this, had we not gotten queries on bus drivers?
No, we had gotten quotes on bus drivers.
Okay. So did we have information in our files, or did Connolly have information in their files, that if someone took a look?
We had information in our files that went back to 2000, that were signed off in 2008.
And did Connolly have an application process? And do we know how, and are we gonna ask them if this was on an application? Right?
This was not on an application because they don't have the Corey. So
Well-
they have they have licensing requirements. So this individual met the licensing requirements that the bus company was following.
So I'm thinking about it a little bit differently than the license requirement. When you apply for a job, sometimes there's an additional question that says, have you ever been convicted or of a crime? And so I'm curious if they have an application and if those questions are on there, and if that was a safeguard that maybe, I don't know, maybe he lied on the application, maybe someone missed it, but I think it's another piece of information. What does their application look like?
Okay.
And then I want to say thank you, because I think that you've handled this really well, and I'm glad I'm not in your shoes. I wish I wasn't in my shoes. I think we are very lucky, and
We are.
because we have an opportunity to do things better and different going forward, and I'm happy that that's the way you're looking at it.
So thank you, Ellen, for that acknowledgement. One of the things that I know and I learn in this work is that when something happens unexpectedly like this, it opens up layers and layers of it leads in all sorts of different directions. So the questions you're asking of me now, the questions that the community is asking of me, these are all layers of things that have been developing over time. And so what it ends up is creating an opportunity to make things better on a lot of levels.
I have one more question, because one of your communications talked about a continuing investigation with respect to school district personnel. Has that concluded, and what is that going to entail if it hasn't? And when can, because I think some of the concern with respect to parents is around the school personnel that may or may not have been involved, and when will they know what the outcome of that investigation is?
So they won't, as you know. It's a personnel issue, and I won't be discussing it.
Okay.
I had a couple questions. One was around, so this was a regular bus driver. Were the
Yes.
families of children on the regular bus route when they had the communication, or
They were
just
not.
that they're going to have a new bus driver?
On-
Here's what's the
Yeah,
what's
on
going on.
Again, it was Monday afternoon, managing a situation and prioritizing
Oh no,
what
I
had to
just
happen
meant,
first.
is there going to be
Uh,
anything
no,
that goes out to them?
Not at this point. I don't think at this point that any more information than they don't already know would be shared, right? I mean, they know, now, everyone now knows it happened very quickly in terms of not only the charge, but also the fact that on the Monday, I think it was determined that he had, he'd been
It's
found
just a
guilty.
communication thing with
Right, but I
parents
guess,
whose kids are used to the same bus
Yeah.
driver, new face.
yeah,
you
I'm
know.
not sure what I would say.
I don't know, maybe that there's going to be a new regular bus driver, or there's going to be a substitute bus driver,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of those logistics. Because there's people who have kids that probably wouldn't have heard about it from the high school, probably heard about it from your communication for the first time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
Yeah, I did hear that concern directly from parents of students, and I'm not minimizing it. I'm just saying, in managing any kind of unexpected situation, we have to prioritize, right, and do things in order. And perhaps that was something that was missed, and I apologize if it was. It was just simply the amount of time that there was in
Oh,
a
I
day
know,
to
I was just
manage,
asking
so.
if that, I don't know
um,
if the communication is kind of over at this
Yeah.
point, and you're, you know.
I think what people would have liked is to have known ahead of time that the person that was charged was their driver. I'm sure that was a shock to them when they went to put their kids on the bus. And I think also very troubling for families to feel like my child's been riding this bus for, some parents have said 3-4 years, this has been my driver. And that's scary news to hear. So probably that is something that if families feel that would be helpful, definitely it'll be a permanent driver, but how long it will take to find somebody to, have you had the same driver every day?
Yes, until Monday.
But since Monday?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, I'll make note of that.
Okay, and then just one other thing, I know that we use other busing companies, because like Nature's Classroom had a different busing company, all these different, will we use the same approach with not just Connolly, but other busing companies that the district employs or, uses throughout the year? Make the same requirements?
So I will write down your question as a question.
Sure.
Because I will need to, before I publicly say yes, I will need to see what the logistics are around that.
Okay.
Well, just to follow up on what Kelly just said, that's a great point, because we certainly use Accept Transportation, so we should be making sure that we hold the Accept drivers to the same standard as our regular bus drivers. That's a great point.
I'm just thinking of the buses that come for the kids that that are on the ski club.
Yeah, but that's a park and rec program, so
Right.
I mean, that's what I was immediately thinking of, but
Yeah.
that's not school district, that's park and rec.
Okay,
But that was
so
something I did think of.
Washington.
Washington
The
DC,
charters.
Nature's
Charters.
Classroom.
Right,
Okay.
the field trips, if they're not school buses.
Exactly. That's a really, really good point. And I just want to echo what Ellen said. This has been, an upsetting and stressful situation. And I think that your communication has been really good and really reassuring to parents. And I think, one could have gone more broadly. So we've learned a few things, and I hope we won't be in a situation of having to employ them again. But overall, I think I have been around for a long time, and I've seen a dramatic improvement in the communication around this issue as compared to what has happened in the past, and I think that you should get credit for that, and I think that it's a great step forward, and I hope that people are appreciative of that. And I know we'll get here at this point, but there's so many people, and typically we don't do this, but I hope we'll have an opportunity for people to ask some questions, if there are things that we haven't thought of to ask you, to get out there, and we can continue to follow up with people as needed. But obviously it's chilling for all of us as parents to think about our children being in that situation potentially. And I think your point is well taken, that we're very lucky that we've discovered some issues that we need to deal with, but we've discovered them without anyone being hurt, which we just can only be grateful for. So now we have an opportunity to take some action and make some improvements. And
That I hope the community understands that there are some things that I cannot comment on. And to your question, there are, in any kind of investigation, only the person conducting the investigation knows all of the information. And people do want to weigh in and give me advice on what should or should not happen. But that's part of why I'm in this position. I need to make decisions that are sometimes unpopular, and I would ask the community to understand that I've had to weigh a lot of information in making decisions that I have to make. And there is, to your point, I know that people have been frustrated about getting a no comment answer from the superintendent, which I've tried very hard to address, and to be able to communicate as much as I possibly can, openly and honestly. I just need to say that there are things that I'm unable to discuss. And so it actually protects the individuals that are part of an investigation. And you know that. Questions?
Just going back to what you just mentioned with the bus driver on the regular route, and people being concerned because they had had him for 3 or 4 years. Had there ever been any prior complaints about this bus driver that you're aware of?
He was very popular, very well liked. And that was the other reason when I made the comment about the students, is somebody said this to me, but he was so nice. And I think, again, educating students that, you can be nice and still be ill. This is an illness. And so I think that, no, to your answer, there hadn't been. On the other hand, I also want to say that there have been, because of this, and understandably so, concerns that have been brought to my attention around other bus drivers, erratic behaviors. But I think it's good, because I think whether or not I can reassure the community that Corys have been checked and there's no priors, if the driving is erratic, then that's unacceptable for whatever reason. Whether it is because of a drinking issue or whether they're just not good drivers, that's not going to be acceptable. And one of the things a discussion that I had today at the high school, actually, with with the principal in response to the concerns of one of the coaches, is that we haven't been asking people to report bad driving. And I had that conversation today again with Connolly to say, I'm going to be asking for reports on bad driving, and we're going to report them to you, because we don't want those drivers. We hire you. You contract with us, and if we're not happy with the product, you're going to hear it from me, and we're going to demand better drivers. It's astounding to me that hasn't been happening. But again, when I say there are layers that we're uncovering, this has not been something that's been asked. And parents are reporting on it. We're following up seriously on any of those reports. So to your point on this driver, no.
The other thing I just want to clarify with the Corys is that, and just correct me if I'm wrong with what you described the differences, is that the bus company does not do a Cory, but the licensing through RMV does a background check of the driving record
And the Cory.
They
do a
but
Cory.
only 5 years.
That's
So
what we were told. Yeah.
Our Cory goes back to the age of 17 for the individual. And we have those Corys to that level for everyone at this point.
Right, so to clarify, right after the arrest, the police had immediate access to all of the background information, and that's why the report that was in the paper around the dates of the priors was so readily available. And I asked that question. So if there's any, suspicion, whatever, they can do that level of background check. So I wanted to clarify that. To the B part of your question, the answer is yes. They're on my desk. They were completed today. I wanted an update. I wanted everybody today. As of today, we're starting, today and moving forward with any new hires to include any substitute drivers. And yes, I have access to any extensive background, and have notified the bus company that I don't know what his standards are, but I have already reported what mine are going to be, and he knows it.
Great, thank you. But the final thing I wanted to just make a point on, and it might have a question, and I need to get to the end of it, but obviously looking at the history is important, but as we all know, people make bad decisions, and we have no control over someone making a bad decision in a moment, which for me as a parent is scary. For all parents is scary. But so in terms of the different changes that we might make as a district in terms of responsibility regarding reporting and those type of things, is there anything that we can divulge now, or is it more that we need to come up with the policy going forward, or how are your plans to address those issues?
Do you mean reporting around concerns about driving?
Whether it be teachers, coaches, students,
Mhm.
parents.
So that is something that I need to look into more closely to see what has been communicated and what is currently in place in handbooks and whatnot. That isn't something I've had a chance to look at yet today, but it needs to be looked at. Policy and expectation. I want to just comment on one more thing. And that is that I know that we're all looking at people's rights and understanding that, you know, if it was 20 years, 25 years since a previous reported incident, I guess the way I look at it is that there are a lot of other jobs that an individual can perform that does not involve being in a moving vehicle with children. That's all. And whether or not that's unrealistic, in my mind, you know, any kind of disability can limit people's ability to do certain jobs. And so if we consider it a disability, an illness, whatever we consider it, I think that we get to make decisions about whether or not that's a job that this individual should be putting themselves in the position of doing because of that, the opportunity for a mistake to happen. And then lives are at stake. So it's pretty black and white to me. It might not be right legally, but in my mind it's black and white.
So I'll pile on a bit in terms of thanking you and commending you for the way that you've handled everything since this incident occurred. I think it's been extremely thorough. I think it's been extremely professional. As we've said, it may have felt challenging to community members that wanted more information on Sunday and into Monday, but it was an ongoing criminal investigation, and there was a large investigation going on, so we did as much as we thought we could. I would also like to publicly thank Chief Lee, Sergeant Bennett, who also attended the press conference, and a guy who we talk about giving credit to a lot, but still not enough, and that's Officer Phil Powers.
Yeah.
As I understand it, Officer Powers basically stationed himself at the high school on Monday to ensure that students weren't grabbed by the press. In addition to individually going to students' houses to interview
Homes
them.
on Sunday, and then whoever he didn't see on Sunday met with on Monday, and then yes, he and Mr. Bishop and Mr. Hanna all did that. At the end of the day, went to make sure that that they kept the press at bay, so that they couldn't.
Yeah, certainly Mr. Bishop and Mr. Hanna as well, but I mean, I saw Officer Powers at 4 o'clock on Monday afternoon, and he, continues to just do his job above and beyond
He does.
with a duty